I want to bring in now Congressman Adam Smith. He's a Democrat out of Washington and the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for being here. I mean, obviously, with the very delicate situation, the war that is unfolding between Israel and Hamas, the United States Congress is an important player here. There's aid that has been discussed that Israel needs, not to mention our allies in Ukraine, and yet the House does not have a speaker.
No, it's a huge problem. The dysfunction of the Republican Party, well, I guess you can guess which is worse. Is it the dysfunction of the Republican Party, or is it the degree to which they've been taken over by MAGA extremists and Donald Trump? Because even before they didn't have a speaker, they were not moving on these issues. They brought us to the brink of breaking the debt ceiling. They brought us to the brink of the government shutting down. They haven't passed appropriations bills, and they haven't passed the supplemental that would put us in a position to meet our needs in Ukraine and Israel. So we need to work with, well, the Senate and the White House, but also get the bipartisan group that supports this to move forward. Because that's the thing. We have the votes in the House for this support. It's just that the MAGA extremists don't want to let it come up. And Speaker McCarthy, bowed to their wishes. And now we're frozen.
Congressman Al Sharpton, when we look at the fact that last Saturday we woke up and people in Israel were under attack, a terrorist attack, and we saw children, babies being killed, elderly being killed. Now, a week later, Saturday, we're seeing a humanitarian crisis where people in Gaza are killed in some instances, in total dire need of assistance. And the United States can't do anything because you don't have a speaker in place, as you just said. How do we even try and negotiate a peace and some sanity when you have people that are bound to just kill people because of who they are, and the United States does nothing? Do you think this sense of urgency even matters to some of your colleagues while we're looking at human disaster every day, all night? Does this even matter to members of Congress?
Well, Al, let me just say, fortunately, there is a sense of urgency with the Biden administration. They are actively engaged in trying to meet all of those challenges that you just outlaid, and also meeting the humanitarian crisis that is in Gaza. We need to work with international partners in Israel as well to try to minimize that damage. It's a devastating situation. We need to work on that. And President Biden has been out front, as has Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and the entire team. They show what cohesive leadership looks like. But to answer your specific question, do the MAGA Republicans in the House care about this? Well, they might care about it, but they don't care enough to do anything about it. They care more about, sticking with their allegiance to Trump and to the extremists. And if that causes dysfunction, they'll take the dysfunction. And it's something that I hope the American people notice. We need a House that's functioning. And I don't like to be overly partisan, but I think it's pretty clear right now that if you want a functioning House, you need Democrats back in charge. And last point on this, and I've spoken with Leader Jeffries on this, we are prepared to work in a bipartisan way with the Republican conference anytime they want that. Former Speaker McCarthy totally rejected that. I hope that whoever his predecessor is takes a different tack.
Congressman Ayman here. I wanted to ask you, sir, about the situation that is unfolding right now inside Gaza. As we just reported in the last hour, unfortunately, the number of Americans killed in this war has gone to 29. 15 are still missing. 500 Palestinian Americans still inside Gaza, unable to get out. A lot of people feel the administration right now is not speaking to all of the Americans that are caught up in this war. Some feel that they are being ignored, that their concerns are not being addressed, and getting those Americans out of Gaza as well is being neglected. I wanted just to hear from you, sir, what you say to the administration in terms of its response so far, speaking to all Americans involved in this war and how they are doing on that front.
Certainly. I think the biggest thing to tell people is it is an extraordinarily difficult situation. We have heard President Biden, we've heard Secretary Blinken, we have heard a number of people urging Israel to follow the laws of war, to deal with the humanitarian crisis. They've been working with Egypt. They've been working with other countries to try to find some way to mitigate that harm. But I hope people understand with the war that Hamas launched, it's difficult. They purposely put civilians in the crosshairs. It is part of their strategy to generate sympathy for what they're doing. They have issued orders telling people in Gaza not to evacuate and attempted to block them from doing that. So it is extraordinarily difficult. I will agree with something I heard one of your previous guests talking about. Israel and the U.S. need to look not just at the short term, but at the long term. Demolishing the current state of Hamas, certainly they need to be weakened, but in and of itself, that will not bring peace to the region. We need to think more broadly about what a long-term, more peaceful situation looks like. Now part of that has been the Abraham Accords, doing outreach to Arab states. But I think President Biden is trying in a very difficult situation to meet the demands you just outlined.
So why not call specifically for de-escalation or a ceasefire until the humanitarian corridor is secured, Americans are allowed to leave, and we can get a handle on the humanitarian crisis so that these people don't pay the price? No one is saying to not do what Israel's doing, but why not simply now, as a member of Congress and others, call for a de-escalation, call for a ceasefire until we can ensure the safety of everybody on the ground who is not a combatant?
Sure. Well, the answer to that question is, Israel's fighting a war, and it's a very difficult war. They are under threat from Hamas. They're under threat from Hezbollah. If we call for them to de-escalate, is anyone going to call for Hamas and Hezbollah to de-escalate? How does Israel protect their interests and protect civilians at the same time? Sadly, given what Hamas did, Israel cannot simply stand down at this point. And then you say, well, okay, they can fight, but be careful about it. And I agree with that. But that's really hard to do. So we should call for humanitarian corridors, for humanitarian assistance. It's hard at this point to tell Israel how to defend itself after what happened last week.
Congressman, before we let you go, I definitely want to talk about the speaker situation unfolding in the House of Representatives. On Friday, Republicans nominated Congressman Jim Jordan as their speaker designate. Now, he does not have the number of votes required to actually be the Speaker of the House yet, which I think is why you all went home this weekend, and you are coming back on Monday, is my understanding. Jim Jordan is, among other things, he is an election denier. We have a lot of conversations in this country, and I know I've spoken to you previously about our democracy. What has the conversation among the Democratic caucus been about the likes of Congressman Jordan and the fact that that is who Republicans have put forward at this time?
We are deeply concerned about it, but in no way surprised. And in fact, this is the most frustrating aspect of this. There's a lot of attention on the most obvious MAGA extremists in the Republican conference. Your Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Taylor Greens and Bob Goods and Andy Biggs and all those people. The real problem is the so-called moderates, the ones who claim not to support that, who simply bow to the MAGA extremists every time. And I wish I could say with confidence that they won't do it this time, that they won't elect Jim Jordan, who is everything that you just said and much more. He's pushing the ridiculous investigation of President Biden at this point in the impeachment. He is about as extreme as you can get. But I don't know. The moderates, they cave every single time. I hope they don't cave this time, but we're deeply concerned that they will. We'll wind up with Jim Jordan as Speaker, and the House will become even more partisan and more dysfunctional.
Well, the world will definitely be watching the House of Representatives on Monday. Congressman Adam Smith, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.